Hello everyone, welcome to P2P's third online tutorial. My name is Ria Kodkani, and today we're going to be going over the social science passage of the reading section in the SAT. The reading section is the first of 4 sections on the SAT, and in this section, students are given 65 minutes to answer 52 multiple choice questions. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to go over the types of passages and the types of questions you may see. The reading section consists of one literature passage, one historical passage about a U.S. founding document or the great global conversation that inspires, and this can include women's rights, civil rights, freedom, or justice, one social science passage, and 2 scientific passages. A general overview of the types of questions you may see are specific questions where the answers can be found directly in the text, general overview questions which may ask the passage's purpose or the function of something that the author wrote in the passage, evidence questions, which ask you to find the lines that provide evidence for the previous question, vocabulary and context questions, and graph questions. Today, we are specifically focusing on the social science passage. College Board describes this passage as a selection about economics, psychology, sociology, or some other social science. Today, we'll be looking at passage number 2 from the SAT practice test number 7, which is available on the College Board website. Before I start to read the passage, I always read the blurb that is provided so I have a better understanding of what it is that I'm reading. And if we look above the passage, it says, "This passage is adapted from David Rotman, How Technology is Destroying Jobs, by MIT Technology Review." Since this is the social science passage, we should take everything that the author says as literal as possible. We're not going to be asked about the author's tone, but there might be a question about what a person in the passage feels about this specific trend that is going on. As I read the passage, I like to underline any information that really stands out to me or relates to the title. I also circle any names or studies that I come across, and as you're reading, pay attention to the end of the intro paragraph for the thesis, the opening and ending sentences of paragraphs for main ideas, and the conclusion. Look out for transition words like however, despite, and similarly, which may mark a shift or continuation of ideas. Okay, so I'm going to save everyone time from reading the passage out loud, but I will show you my annotations once I'm done. Okay, so I have my annotations on the screen, and basically what I did was I just circled any names or key events that was discussed in the passage, and then I tried to find any information that related to the title, which we know because we read the blurb, How Technology is Destroying Jobs. So as I was reading the passage, I tried to find any facts, statistics, or any opinions that related to that. And then the reason why I recommend students annotate when they are taking the SAT, specifically the reading test, is because 1, it ensures that you're actually reading and you're being an active reader and you're paying attention, which is always important. But then 2, it's very likely that the information that you underline has something to do with the test questions, or sometimes you might underline something and that might actually be an answer to a test question. So it just makes your life easier because you've highlighted all the important stuff and now you can just ignore the fluff and the unnecessary information. Before we head on to the questions, I thought it might be helpful if I explained to you my thought process as I was annotating, for at least the first 2 paragraphs. Just out of habit, I always circle any names I come across because the SAT might ask you to identify the opinions, the beliefs, the attitudes that certain scholars, scientists, or experts might have towards a certain trend, and in this case, it is the destruction of jobs. So having those names circled always acts as a reference point and just makes it easier for me to find what they believe in. I underlined advances in computer technology are largely behind the sluggish employment growth of the last 10 to 15 years because that relates to the title, and it is also the thesis, which is the point that the author is trying to convey, the main idea basically. I go on to underline robots, automation, and software can replace people. It's the same idea of the destruction of jobs. I also underline they believe that rapid technological change has been destroying jobs faster than it's creating them, which is kind of the main idea also, contributing to the stagnation of median income and the growth inequality. And that is one of the effects of the destruction of jobs, and I thought that might be important later on, or there might be a question about those effects. And then lastly, I underlined something similar is happening in other technologically advanced countries to show that this trend is global and it's very, very important. So I recommend that everyone annotates because it helps you kind of stay on track and it helps you identify what's really important in the passage. Now that we've finished talking about annotations and what you should be doing as you're reading, we can move on to the questions. So number 11 asks, the main purpose of the passage is to, and we kind of already know what the passage is about since we read the blurb and we learned about how technology is destroying jobs. But then also we found the thesis in the first paragraph, which says, advances in computer technology are largely behind the sluggish employment growth of the last 10 to 15 years. So we know that our answer has something to do about how technology is destroying jobs. So if we look at A, it says examine the role of technology in workers' lives during the last century. There's nothing in the passage that has to do with workers' lives. If we look at B, advocate for better technology to enhance workplace conditions. Once again, there's nothing about workplace conditions. C, it's the same reason, there's nothing about the workplace, so our only option is D, which makes sense if we read it. Assess the impact of advancements in technology on overall job growth. And that's exactly what the title says. Next, we have questions 12 and 13. And these two questions are very interesting because in the second of the two questions, we have to find the lines that provide the best evidence to the previous question above. So let's read number 12. According to Bryn, Joffelson, and McAfee, advances in technology since approximately the year 2000 have A, resulted in low job growth in the United States, B, global workplace changes, C, more skilled laborers in the United States, or D, no global creation of new jobs. Immediately we can rule out C because we already know that the whole passage has to do with how technology is destroying jobs. So we can rule that out. And then if we look at lines 1 to 6, which say, MIT business scholars have argued that impressive advances in computer technology are largely behind the sluggish employment growth of the last 10 to 15 years. Just from that sentence, we can rule out D because D is too extreme of an answer. Lines 1 to 6 is basically talking about the slow job growth. It has nothing to do with how job growth has completely stopped. D is too extreme of an answer, so we can rule out C and D. So our only options are A and B. While they do talk about how advances in computer technology has changed the workplace, we don't know if these changes in the workplace are worldwide. There's nothing in the text to suggest that. So that's why our only option is A. Talks about the word sluggish is our keyword, and in our answer, low job growth is our keyword. So from that, we can conclude number 12 is A, and our lines to best support that in number 13 is A. Number 14 says, the primary purpose of lines 26 to 28 is to A, describe a process, B, highlight a dilemma, C, clarify a term, or D, explain a term. If we look at the lines, it says, in economics, productivity, the amount of economic value created for a given unit of input, such as an hour of labor. So we can see that the author has to kind of make a stop in the middle of a sentence to describe what productivity is. Just by that, we can rule out A and B. And since this is the first time he's really going out of his way to describe what productivity is, and he's just defining it and not really adding any additional details, we know that he's just explaining it. If he went on further to describe more and go into it, he would be clarifying it. But since he's just describing it, he's explaining it. So the answer for 14 is D. Moving on to number 15, which says, as used in line 35, clear most mainly means. So for vocab and context questions, what I like to do is immediately go to the text, try to figure out what that word means, and then look at the answer options to find which word in my head best matches to the possible options. So let's just go ahead and do that. Line 35 says, the pattern is clear. As businesses generate more value from the workers, the country as a whole became richer. So that's all we really need. So in my head, the word clear means evident. It's very obvious. So let's go to our options and see which one best fits that. There's pure, which doesn't really match. Keen doesn't really match either. untroubled? Not really, but we see unmistakable, and that's what evident and obvious most closely matches to. So our answer for 15 is D. Questions 16 and 17 are similar to the questions we already answered, like 13 and 14. So let's use the same process as we did before. 16 asks, which of the following best characterizes Katz's attitude towards today's digital technologies? Lines 81 to 82. To have a better understanding of what his attitude is, let's read the lines before and after it. Still, Katz doesn't dismiss the notion that there's something different about today's digital technologies, something that could affect an even broader range of work. The question, he says, is whether economic history will serve as a useful guide. So if we continue reading on, he asks a series of questions. So that shows even he doesn't know how today's digital technologies will impact job creation or job growth. So just from that, we can say the answer to 16 is C. And if we look at the lines that show this uncertainty or him not knowing, we should choose D because he asked in lines 91 and 92, if technology disrupts enough, who knows what will happen? So 17 is D. 18 says, as used in line 83, range it most nearly means, so let's take a look, something that could affect an even broader range of work. So in this case, I feel like range means span or extent. So let's look at the answer options and see which best matches span or extent. In this case, it would be scope, which is B. So 18 is B. Question 19 is a graph question. What's nice about the graph questions is it doesn't really require a lot of math knowledge. It's pretty straightforward, so let's take a look. Question 19 says, according to figure 1, which of the following years showed the widest gap between percentages of productivity and employment? So for these types of questions, we're going to have to look at all the answer options and compare and then choose one with the biggest gap. Let's start with 1987. Look at the gap between the black line and the dotted line for 1987, which is A. Now let's do the same for 1997. Let's do the same for 2007 and 2013. And if we look at all of those options, the one that has the biggest gap is D, 2013. 20 asks, which statement is supported by figure 2? For this type of graph question, we have to look at all of the possible answers, eliminate, and then choose our final answer. So let's begin. A says the country with the greatest growth in output per manufacturing worker from 1960 to 1990 was Germany. If we look at the graph, A is incorrect. The country with the greatest growth was actually Japan. B says Japan experienced its smallest increase in output per manufacturing worker from 2000 to 2011. In this case, the answer is also incorrect because Japan actually experienced its greatest increase. C says each of the three countries experienced an increase in its output per manufacturing worker from 1960 to 2011. This answer is correct because it clearly shows an increase of worker output in all three countries between 1960 and 2011. So the correct answer for 20 is C. For our final question, number 21, it asks, which additional information, if presented in figure 2, would be most useful in evaluating the statement in lines 57 to 60? In those lines it says, productivity is at record levels. Innovation has never been faster, and yet at the same time, we have a falling median income, and we have fewer jobs. Just from that statement, we know there's two key points we want to remember. Falling median income and fewer jobs. So we can cross out C and D because those two answer options have no relevance to the two key points we want to remember. Now, the flaw with answer option A is because the comparison of the median income from three nations factory workers within a single year wouldn't help us in evaluating his original statement about worker productivity in a span of 10 to 15 years. B is the better answer because it gives us the range from 1960 to 2011. And without these numbers, it's not possible to determine if his statement is correct. Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you still have questions, feel free to email us at p2pcollegeprep@gmail.com. We are also hosting in-person sessions, so if you're interested, please sign up at www.p2pcollegeprep.org. Thank you so much for watching our video, and we hope to see you next time.